Hello, everybody. This is your host, Ian Prescott, and we're bringing on a great friend of the show and a great friend in general, Kevin Smith, who, for the most part, I think will be on just about every one of these podcasts. In case he is not, we're going to get him to be able to introduce himself a little bit as well. He is currently a student at Arizona State University. He is very heavily involved with grassroots organizations and around the sport of roller hockey, and is always constantly thinking of ways to progress the sport forward. He also is the lead host and creator of a show called NCRHA Coast to Coast, which has to do with college club roller hockey across the nation. And we're talking to him now. What's up, Kevin?
How's it going, Ian? Glad to be here.
Yeah, doing well. Really glad to have you here, and glad to have you for all future occurrences in which you will be here. So we got a couple things we're going to talk about. I think the first of which that you brought up to me, that you giving me a call and just saying, "Hey, man, are people blowing up your wall right now talking about Stephen A. Smith referring to John Tortorella needing to get fired and everything like that?" But I think before we can even do that, we should probably give some context about John Tortorella and who he is, and also what he said. So John Tortorella is the current coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets. The Columbus Blue Jackets, of course, NHL team based out of Columbus, Ohio. If you guys don't know where Columbus is or don't watch hockey, but if you don't watch hockey, you're probably not listening to me. He is also the coach of Team USA's World Cup hockey team. He is kind of known for his off-the-cuff, very colorful remarks, very heated kind of individual. He is a former coach of the Vancouver Canucks, who he coached for a year, had a big run-in with Bob Hartley during that time there. He was the coach of the New York Rangers for a number of years, and then he won a Stanley Cup in 2004 as he coached the Tampa Bay Lightning. And what he said at a news conference, he was speaking with Linda Cohn, who tweeted out a response he had to the Colin Kaepernick situation, which is, "If any of my players sit on the bench for the national anthem, they will sit there the rest of the game." So, Kevin, I will let you go first because I have so many feelings. What do you think about that?
Well, it's a tough topic. I mean, in context, he's talking about Team USA. I don't think he was referring to the NHL team, and even if he was, I think that we can, like I said, we can draw some lines. In regards to this being about Team USA, I can see why he said what he said, but I think I'm going to kind of bring a different angle on this, and not just so much focus on the comments, but talk about why we're even talking about this in the first place. This shouldn't have ever been something that John Tortorella felt the need to stick his head into, and it wouldn't have been if ESPN didn't make it an issue. Linda Cohn asked him a question that basically gave Tortorella the platform to make the statement that he made, and that gave Stephen A. Smith a platform to fight back or disagree with him on the issue, and kind of created this issue out of nothing. And so I just think that my whole point, I guess I want to make, my main point is that people need to understand why these things come up, and not just say, oh, ESPN is, trying to be politically correct because they let Stephen A. Smith say what he wanted to say. This was the entire issue was basically, brought up not solely because ESPN's trying to make money, but you got to realize, I mean, topics are controversial and are allowed to be discussed on ESPN because ESPN knows that when there's a controversial topic or issue that comes up, people are going to watch. People are going to pick sides, and people are going to share links on social media.
True.
And that's how ESPN makes money, is through ad revenue. The more people that watch, the more money they can make. I mean, they are a business, and they are trying to maximize revenues. So when they give a certain issue or topic more exposure, I think that they know what they're doing. I mean, they know when they asked Tortorella about this and when they brought Stephen A. Smith on to discuss this, this really is a non-issue. It never really should have came up. And ESPN, they're smart and they know that people are talking about it just like they are now. And that's ultimately what they wanted, was people to share ESPN links on social media and be talking about this, regardless of what people think. They just want people talking and sharing ESPN. So I think they got what they wanted.
I think so too. I mean, the bigger question for me, I think, is when did we start looking to John Tortorella for nuanced opinions about anything? Like when did it come up to a point when we were all like, John Tortorella needs to talk to us right now about issues about protesting and race in society? Because that's not John Tortorella's MO. That's not even like if there are NHL coaches I'm going to ask about that, John Tortorella would have been the last on my list unless I was trying to get that exact soundbite. That's
yeah, context, right? I mean, for people in hockey, I think everybody knows John Tortorella is kind of he's your emotional spark a fire, light a fire under your ass kind of guy. He's the guy that goes in the locker room and he's going to throw a bunch of shit around and he's going to get everybody fired up after a bad period, and he's that emotional spark plug that certain teams need. And that's kind of has explained his career as a coach, right? You've had teams that have been successful under that. You've had teams that have not been close to successful, teams that had a lot of talent that flopped, partially because they might not have fit in his system, but also because it's kind of a high risk, high reward scenario. I mean, everybody knows that certain coaching styles don't work well with certain types of players. And that's just who Tortorella is, though. He's the kind of – it's not surprising that he would make the statement he made, regardless of whether it's right or wrong. That I think is kind of a separate topic. But, yeah, he's not necessarily somebody that you would expect to have a more thoughtful approach to it, or to think about different areas that are worth kind of considering in this whole thing. But I will say this: if you're going to represent the United States of America and put that Team USA jersey on, I don't have a problem with you saying something outside of the locker room, in a press conference or things of that nature. But I think when you are on the ice and you're wearing that jersey, it does make sense to stand up for the flag. And even if you don't agree with everything that it represents, I think in that context, it is important. And I think that there are plenty of ways in which you can make yourself heard. And I think it is different than doing it in an NHL game. I think that there is some differences there. But that aside, I really don't think that this was an issue or should have been an issue or was anything that Tortorella needed to discuss. And I mean, there aren't any African-American players on this roster, are there? Are there any black players playing for Team USA at the World Cup?
No, actually, hold on. Maybe Dustin Byfuglien?
I don't know.
Let's see here. The Team USA roster.
Because I think that's a pretty big part of the argument. I mean, if there isn't a black player on that roster, the chances of somebody doing it in the first place, I think, are low, because I think that hockey, compared to other sports, has a little bit less of
so Dustin Byfuglien is on the team.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
Dustin Byfuglien is on the team. He's the only person of color on the team. And I think in the entire tournament there might be two. There is Dustin Byfuglien, and then there is Seth Jones, Popeye Jones' son, who plays for Team North America.
PK is not playing for Canada?
So that's a whole nother thing. Everybody says that PK Subban doesn't fit into the Team Canada defensive structure, which I just think is coded language for he has too big of an attitude, which I don't see, but
yeah, I can see that. I mean, that's part of the reason why Montreal kind of shipped him out, right? I think is
they
didn't
for a much less talented player, I'd say.
Well, at least you think long term that it might not have been the best investment. You think about what PK Subban's done for the community in Montreal. Yeah, you got to be a little surprised at how that shook out. But in regards to this, I mean, if you're Dustin Byfuglien, are you reading anything into these comments? Is it directed at you, or is it kind of just like, you know what, this is Tortorella, that's what he's gonna say, like it is what it is? Because to me, like I said, I just don't think that this should even, I'm not saying it shouldn't be discussed, but I feel like it was only made an issue because people knew it would be discussed. Right. ESPN didn't just bring this up because they wanted to just see what he thought and that was it. They knew that it would lead to things like this. It would lead to it being discussed in other places and in other spaces and people talking about it. And that's ultimately what, large media organizations want to do, is they want people talking about them. That grows their brand and makes them more money. So what do you think?
I think this is about brand growing for everyone involved. I think John Tortorella, and I'm going to give you some more quotes that he said just recently about his initial comments that he had a press conference and he threw out some more stuff. John Tortorella increasing his brand. Like, because let's be honest, John Tortorella is like a mediocre coach. He's okay. He burns out his players after 2 or 3 years. He like gets the most out of the players for that first year. That first or second year, like boom, he's in your butt. Like he's yelling at you. He's got you fired up. He's got you winning games. He's got you all that other kind of stuff because he's yelling at you. And it's like the whole Herb Brooks thing where it's like, oh, if they're going to rally against me, at least they're rallying together kind of thing. And then after those first couple of years, he burns your team out. You can only like, how many speeches where somebody runs into your locker room and tosses a tomahawk of like a chair across the room? Is that going to work for your players? Like,
well, it's funny because I read an article. Yeah. I read an article recently about, it was from a coaching seminar type deal that was held recently. I'm not sure exactly where it was, but it had NHL coaches speaking there, and one of the guys that spoke was Dallas Eakins, who coaches. I want to say he's the head coach of
the Goals,
the San Diego Goals, right? Yeah,
in the AHL. So, he used to be Edmonton Oilers coach for half a year.
And right, and so he's coached at the highest levels, and he was kind of alluding to this, and he was talking about how coaching styles change with kind of as generations change, and he was talking about how the younger players in the league, the millennials, if you will, just don't respond to that style as much. He basically talked about how, if you want to get the most out of players, you want to get your point across, it's not going to be from going in and saying, you basically have to go in there and get them fired up and say it's my way or the highway. But you basically say, look, this is how we're going to win, and this is why this is going to work. Get on board because, we want to win some games, and kind of explaining why you're doing something and being a little bit more, not necessarily holding your hand, but I believe the quote was essentially, he said, this is the selfie generation, as I like to call it. You have to explain how and why something benefits the team and the individual. You can't make them do things. You have to inspire them to do things. And you can't use punishment to get your point across. It's a terrible motivator. And the coaches I remember most are the ones who inspired me. So, I think that Tortorella is kind of a dying breed in a way, in terms of his coaching style.
Yep.
But I figured that might be worth throwing in there.
Yeah, I think we're kind of moving towards the advent, or not the advent, but like we're moving towards like uphill towards an analytic approach. You look at John Chaika over in Phoenix, or I guess it's not Phoenix now, it's just the Arizona Coyotes, moving towards a younger, more advanced stats driven approach and things like that. But I mean, so, all right, we'll continue to go into this whole Tortorella thing. So today, he kind of doubled down on it. He said, I have a number of people come to me. Yes, Quite honestly, I woke up this morning. Yeah, I didn't realize because I don't listen or read to any of your stuff or pay too much attention to it because I'm locked in here. But yeah, when I woke up, I had my phone. So some players have come to me, and yeah, I'm not backing off. I'll tell you right now, he said. And try to understand me. I'm not criticizing anybody for stepping up and putting their thoughts out there about things, and I am not. I am the furthest thing away from being political. No chance. I'm involved. I'm not involved in that stuff. This is your anthem. This is your flag, and that shouldn't come into play for a second. It is not what these people do. So, question, how do you feel about this idea of him saying, I am the furthest thing away from being political, anything political? Because I think that's a crock of crap.
That's tough. I don't think that it's one of those things where maybe he's not intending to be political, but everything these days is political, for better or for worse. Whether or not that's because we make things political that maybe don't need to be, or just because politics kind of encompasses more racial issues today than it used to. These are kind of nuanced debates, I think, that you could have, but I don't know if his intents or if his intentions were to necessarily be political. I think it's one of those things where people associate the flag and pride in country not necessarily with politics. I think a lot of people just associate it with especially in sports. You think about Team USA and you think of pride in country and you represent your country. I don't know if the majority of people in sports or athletics necessarily do associate Team USA with those things. I really don't. I mean, whether, for better or for worse, I just don't know if people are thinking about that. I think they're just like, oh, wow, I get to represent my country, or I get to play at the highest level. And maybe that's part of it, is that the emphasis is more about, competing at the highest level possible, which, is probably the international stage in a lot of cases. You could argue the NHL, but in this case, the World Cup of Hockey is being produced by the NHL. So it's kind of the international version of, the sport at the highest level, if you will. So I don't know. That's tough.
I mean, I think the thing is, there's two things I have issue with what Tortorella says in that. First off, by him saying, I'm not criticizing anyone for stepping up and putting their thoughts out there about things, it's like you are, because you are saying, if you are stepping up and putting your thoughts out there about this, I'm going to bench you. Like, that to me is like the ultimate like that's like being critical about being like, oh, like, especially if you say like, I think earlier on, like he said, there's no chance, that you're going to do it with the flag and with the flag. And it's like saying, like, it's just because it's a popular belief doesn't mean you're not criticizing somebody for it, or it doesn't mean you're not being political. I think, like, one of the things is, it's like something I've heard before. I want to say it was Bomani Jones that said it, or Dave Zirin, and I can't believe I would just mix those two things up. It was Dave Zirin, I believe. He said the act that associates you politically with a flag is not sitting down for it, it's standing up for it. Like, that to me is basically like, that's the most political way you could do it. If you are supporting something and saying that, if you don't show the support for this flag, like, regardless of the context you're in, like, if you don't stand up for this flag and show support for it, you're going to sit and you're not going to play the sport that you're here to play. Like, and when I think about it as like, oh, you can't do that, like, versus like in a private situation when you're playing for the Columbus Blue Jackets, if you're Seth Jones, or if you're playing for the Winnipeg Jets, if you're Dustin Byfuglien, versus if you're playing for Team USA or Team North America U23, the argument, the argument I would put up is Tommy Smith and John Carlos were standing on the podium, receiving a gold and a bronze medal for track and field at the Olympics, holding their fist up in the air in 1968 with black gloves on while representing the United States of America. You know what I mean? Like you can make those arguments. You can do these things while you're still wearing a U.S. crest on your chest, and that doesn't make you any less of an American. I think that makes you the utmost of an American, and I think that's the most American thing you can do as well. But I mean, that's how I feel about what he was saying there.
If he had said, okay, so here's something that, and I haven't read all of his comments about him doubling down on this, but at any point did he say anything about guys saying things off the ice? Or
it doesn't look like it.
So to me, what he's saying is, I don't care what you say outside of this locker room. I don't care what you say when we're not on the ice. And that was kind of what I got when he was saying when you were referring to his quote about, I'm not saying guys shouldn't say anything about it, or whatever you know what I'm talking about, whatever he had said. I think that he's basically saying, to me, this is what I'm kind of taking out of it, is when you're on the ice and you're playing for my team and you're playing for our country, then you stand up for the anthem. And if you want to go outside and say what you want or be political or criticize outside, then you can do that, but not when you're part of this team. That's kind of what I got out of his comments. And whether or not if he says I'm not being political, that doesn't necessarily mean he is or isn't. But I don't think his intentions were to, just trash Kaepernick or anything along the lines of that. I think he's just saying, like, look, when you're playing for Team USA, you get up for the flag. And if you want to leave the locker room and you want to talk about Black Lives Matter or something like that, I don't have a problem with that. But police brutality or any of these issues that are in the spotlight right now. But let's focus on hockey when we're here. Let's stand up, honor our country. We're wearing the flag on our jerseys. Well, let's do that. And then outside, we'll do whatever you want. But if you're not going to buy into that team mentality, which is, I think, something that gets associated with hockey, and I think that's why you're going to see a lot of hockey people, I think, come to defend.
His defense,
come to his defense. I don't think it's necessarily because, you will see people that come to his defense that are also completely against Kaepernick or think that it's disrespectful to veterans and things of that nature, which I think a lot of people would find veterans they would find the response of veterans to be surprising, because most veterans, from what I've seen online and things and talking to people that I know that have served, are completely okay with Kaepernick and his actions, because they are fighting for freedom, and for him to have the freedom to be able to protest. That's part of the freedom that we have in this country. But I don't necessarily know if it's necessarily, I guess, the same context when you in regards to it being hockey and a team sport and whatnot. I don't know. It's very complex for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I'm glad that we have the situation where people feel that they can talk about it. I think that, unfortunately, in hockey, there is a very particular type of person and player that has it, and very few of those people have very many interactions with people who might refer to themselves as woke, as you may say. But I do think that there is some serious debate that's being had amongst tons of people, and people could be speaking into echo chambers too. You could be speaking into a chamber where everybody hears the same thing and says the same thing that you are saying. And very rarely will you find yourself surrounded in a position where people are having discussions that explore both sides of the question. And I think that Tortorella probably felt the need to say this and be out like this, because many of the people, like TJ Oshie, is not going to take a knee during the national anthem. Like we know, like Patrick Kane is not going to take a knee. Zach Parise, Ryan Suter not taking a knee during that national anthem. Like, let's be honest.
But is that because of hockey culture? Or is it because of their beliefs? I mean, I think part of it is simply just hockey culture. Like, what, you know?
I think so too.
I don't necessarily know if – I think a lot of the times you don't see people being outspoken in hockey because it's just – they're worried about their team. I mean, you know, for better or for worse, one thing that comes along with the game is I think putting the game and putting your teammates and putting those things above other things. People aren't going to, you know, let their team get divided by politics, and you're not going to see whether it's, you know, college roller hockey or it's the NHL. I don't think you're going to see Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton dividing locker rooms in the NHL. And you know what I mean? Like, you could definitely say part of that is because of race, and that, you know, the NHL doesn't have as many people of color. And so that might lead to less people being outspoken or critical of what's going on in certain areas or situations. But in general, I just don't think that hockey culture breeds that. There's less individuality in hockey culture compared to other sports. And I mean, you see guys in the NFL and in the NBA and in Major League Baseball and in UFC and every other popular sport these days that of all races and creeds and colors that are much more outspoken than the average typical hockey player. I mean, let's do a end of the first period intermission report. I'm here with Ian Prescott. He's the goalie. How'd it go out there? What'd you think? What were you seeing? Yeah. Oh, I mean, the guys played real well, and, you know, we're doing all the right things.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's the same thing.
Yeah, we're giving 110% out there. I think the boys are getting down in front of shots, and, you know, I'm trying to see what I can, and the things that I can't, you know, I try to let the boys handle. Yeah, it's absolutely the same thing every time.
Right. So, you know, if everybody goes out and we get pucks in deep and, you know, we're winning battles, we're going to come out, we're going to win this game. And so, you know, I think that is a pretty good, you know, representation of what you would expect across the board. Is it's the team first mentality, and guys aren't really focused on a lot of these other things. It doesn't mean that they don't necessarily have opinions, but they kind of check their opinions at the door. And
absolutely.
And, you know, that's just something that comes along with hockey. So
to kind of move towards, we'll slightly move away from the Tortorella talking about Kaepernick situation. Have you had the ability to hear about Bill Lynch, a owner of the Spirit, which is a national, it's the Washington Spirit. They belong to the National Women's Soccer League. Did you hear about his interaction with Megan Rapinoe, who is also taking solidarity with Colin Kaepernick?
Was she the player that kneeled on the sideline?
Yes. So
okay.
She kneeled on the sideline.
I saw that.
Yeah, she kneeled on the sideline during the national anthem because she's representing the LGBT community. She is an out sports player, soccer player. She played for the women's national team that won a World Cup. She's a midfielder, I believe. She made a public declaration that she's going to take a knee because she understands she understands the struggle of people of color, and also as a person who's dealing or who's representing the LGBTQ or LGBTQIA community. She's taking a knee herself. Obviously, there's all kinds of issues with transgender rights and things of that nature. But Bill Lynch basically heard that she's taking a public declaration to take a knee, and he said this. During the United States national anthem tonight, we decided to play the anthem in our stadium ahead of schedule rather than subject our fans and friends to the disrespect we feel such an act would represent, the Spirit said in a statement. To willingly allow anyone to hijack this tradition means so much to millions of Americans and many of our own fans, and any cause effectively would be just as disrespectful as doing it ourselves. Professional athletes have incredible numbers of followers to which they believe they have the ability to articulate a conversation with objectives and plans and begin a serious conversation directly or through traditional media appearances without insulting our military and fans. The tradition of honoring our military and our patriotism before our games is very important to us. Bill Lynch is an Air Force veteran, by the way. We strongly feel that there are better ways to begin a conversation about a cause than tarnishing a tradition that is so important to many. So Megan Rapinoe slammed Lynch in the post-match interview. This is what I'm getting from Outsports.com, which is a part of SB Nation. It is bleeping or expletive deleted, unbelievable, saddened by it. It's pretty clear what the message is. I'm trying to bring to light in Chicago what I continue to try and talk about the last few days. Clearly, with the Spirit owners' actions, it is a necessary conversation. It was incredibly distasteful 4 days before one of the worst tragedies in our country to say that I hijacked this event. I mean, it's just really disappointing and disrespectful. We want to talk about disrespect and me disrespecting. He didn't even give both teams a chance to even stand in front of it and show their respects. It's unbelievable. It's truly unbelievable act to me. So, how are we feeling about that?
It's wow. I found the article. I found an article on SB Nation on another blog, kind of reading about it, and it's, I guess here's what I'll say. I think that this doesn't get us anywhere.
Right.
This is, and I'm not saying that Rapinoe doesn't have the right to do it. She obviously does. But when it gets to this point where
you're playing it before they even come out on the field, like it's like y'all not even gonna get a chance. Like,
yeah, I think that got I mean, he clearly took this way too far. But it's, I mean, what are we doing here? Like, what? I understand why people are protesting, and I'm not saying they shouldn't protest, but
right.
This conversation, like you said, you talked about it being an echo chamber, and I think that that's kind of where we're at. I mean, you go on Facebook and you see news articles and discussions, and they're generally people that you agree with, and we know about algorithms that Facebook uses and things of that nature that kind of create these echo chambers where you're only going to see the side that you agree on, and people unfriend each other when they disagree with that person on a topic, or they unfollow them and they don't want to see their posts. And Facebook and social media in general, I'm not just going to put Facebook out or blame Facebook, but social media has kind of created this culture where people can sound off or put something up, generally one-sided or taken out of context, and put it up and then kind of say, like, yeah, that's what I believe, like, who's with me.
Right.
And I think that is kind of directly represented in a way in how these conversations are being had, because, it's sound bites, it's quick little things, like whether it's Tortorella's comment or this guy decides to put out this press release and decides, oh, well, we're not even going to give her a chance to do it. We're just going to play the anthem before anybody else is there, kind of thing. Like, why does this have to be the way that we're supposed to talk about these? We're not talking about the issues. We're talking, instead of talking about the reasons why Kaepernick and Rapinoe are protesting, we're talking about the fact that they're protesting. And what does that get us?
Yes. I think that even on Rapinoe's side, she's not even completely innocent in this. I mean, like obviously Bill Lynch took it kind of far. Like he played it right before before anybody could get out there, so the fans didn't even have to acknowledge that somebody was going to protest about it. But the fact that she says, to say I tried to hijack the event 4 days before one of the worst tragedies in our country, I don't think Bill Lynch was using the word hijack in the term to be like, oh, she's hijacking the events just like those Muslims hijacked like the plane in 9/11. Like, I don't think that was his point for that. And I think that is a straw man argument in order
to make him look bad, right? Like
to make him look bad. Like, hey, look at what this dude said. He's a bigot. And like, that's a problem with call out culture in general now. Like, people don't like what they hear from somebody else, they're like, yo, this dude's a racist, or like, yo, this dude's a liberal, or like something like that. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
like
everything PC culture, right?
PC culture, like people say like people use the word PC, like being nice to people and not calling each other slurs is a bad thing. Like that's where we're at in this, like where if you say like, you know, like I want to be like, I just want to like interrupt you and give you this idea about being politically correct, and people are like, well, that's a liberal term, and then like just like throw things around the room. Or like if somebody who's not really been around people of color says something that's like kind of messed up, like, or like doesn't understand that he's saying a microaggression, instead of us being like if somebody came up to me and was like, oh, like your hair is so curly, let me touch your hair, I'm gonna be like, no, stop first. And then I'm gonna probably say, there's a reason why I reacted so violently to this. Let me school you real quick about why saying that, or like saying, oh, you're a testament to your race, is like not okay to say. And here's some information, and here's some of this stuff. But if you do it again, I'm gonna check you. Like that's different.
Yeah, and I think intent is part of it. And I mean, saying you're a testament to your race versus your hair is curly are also slightly different, right? Like,
yeah,
I guess like. And I know you're not saying that, you're not equating them, but you're
no, I'm just thinking of
yeah, like little things. Like, so I mean, I think people even have a tough time understanding that, and like understanding what microaggressions are. And I have a tough time understanding. I mean, I've looked into it more because I've wanted to educate myself. Or like, you always hear people talking about trigger warnings and things like that. And now, like, as this whole University of Chicago thing came up, I started to realize that all that means is a teacher is basically saying like, hey, we're going to talk about rape in this culture that happened. There were these, you know, there was mass murder and rape in this genocide, and we're going to talk about that today. Just a heads up. Like, I don't realize, or I don't really think like that's a big deal if
I don't think that's a big deal either.
And it shouldn't be. And like, I don't understand why that is, you know, means that millennials are weak, or that it's like the liberalization of America or anything like that. Like, I mean, I think that's just kind of like hey, we're going to talk about something that might be a sensitive topic. Like, that doesn't mean that we're not going to talk about it. I'm not saying we're going to change the subject. If you don't like it, raise your hand. Yep. I'm just giving you a heads up. Like, I'm about to talk about raping and pillaging of villages. Yeah. Like, here's your warning. So, you know, I think that,
and it's also meant to give people space if they have PTSD from a sexual assault themselves.
Right. And that is, and that's a very important thing. Or it could be a number of things. It could be like somebody witnessed a shooting or something like that, and we're going to talk about, you know, whatever it is. I mean, I think it's important, like, to understand that people do have you know, trauma from situations that they've endured, and like giving somebody a heads up that something's going to be discussed shouldn't be a bad thing, especially if you're going to get into detail about it and all those things. But, you know, something I was talking to my dad about recently was, I think that there is part of the problem is that, as you kind of were talking about, how people just kind of start name calling, and, you know, you're a bigot or you're a racist as soon as somebody hears something that they don't necessarily agree with, or something that, you know, Donald Trump said, and they want to call somebody a bigot or a racist. Like, I think we need to kind of redefine what some of those terms mean. Maybe not necessarily redefine them, but I don't think that PC, politically correct, bigot, racist, I don't think that the definition of those terms are viewed the same. I don't think that by different people. I don't think that necessarily, let's say, liberals and conservatives. I don't think liberals and conservatives share the same definitions of those words. And I think that there's a very big disconnect in what people think certain words mean. And I think that kind of creates a lot of this tension that really doesn't necessarily need to be there. What do you think?
I think that obviously we have different definitions. Like somebody grew up in the '60s, they're gonna be like, "Yo, racism was when people, used to get lynched," and like somebody growing up now is gonna be like, "Racism is when you give housing market or the housing market gives out predatory loans only to black people." Like that is both different. Like those are different understandings of types of racism, but I don't think that the definitions are different. Like I think most people can understand like when somebody says something that everybody in the room goes, "Oh, like you shouldn't have said that." Like I don't think that like just because somebody is conservative, not conservative, that it's that, or somebody's like a liberal, quote unquote, conservative,
No,
quote
and
unquote,
I
liberal, quote unquote,
no, you're
like
right.
have different definitions. But I do think there are different thresholds, and I think that we need to understand where each other are at. But I think that there needs to be some understanding from the people who don't endure those things every day, uh, more so than there needs to be reaching out from the people who do endure these things every day. But I also do think that the people who like the idea of like um call this person like the idea of like the differences between like racism and bigotry and PC and not PC and all that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, there's a distance between what people are willing to tolerate and willing not to tolerate, and there's got to be some way to find a middle ground. I don't know if we're ever going to get to a middle ground or anything like that, which is really bleak, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. And I guess to clarify, I guess what I would just say is maybe they're not necessarily different definitions. And like you said, if somebody says something messed up in a room, I think everybody knows. But I guess maybe some of it has to do with intent. So, I think a lot of people would say racism is where you're intentionally saying something or discriminating against somebody, knowingly, like you're calling somebody out or whatever because of their race. Whereas I think there's a disconnect in that regard, maybe in terms of intent. Like if you say something that you can say something that's racist or has racial undertones or whatnot without maybe necessarily intentionally doing it. And I think that's why you hear people say like, "Oh, if you like Donald Trump, you're a racist." Well, I don't think that that's the case. I don't think that you are a racist because you like Donald Trump. Like I think that is honestly, I think that is it's dangerous to have that mentality because that might not necessarily be why they like Donald Trump. Now, does that mean that has Donald Trump has obviously said things that have had that have been racist or that have had racial undertones? I think like that's very important, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's why somebody supports him. And so I guess that's kind of really more what I'm getting at is I think that some
Right.
people think
Yeah.
there has to be intent, and so other people just think like, no, if you say anything that reflects
So I
that way,
think
then it's automatically racist.
I think that the so there's the like I do a lecture about this kind of like about intent versus impact. And I mean like so like if you're a hockey player and your intention is to hit somebody into the boards, but the impact is you paralyze them for life, that person is going to be like, "Oh, you intended just to hit me." He's going to be like, "You paralyzed me." You know what I mean? Like
Right.
that's going to be like so like I think understanding what like you might not have the intentions to say something or do something or whatever, but the impact might end up being you've done this. I think there has to be an understanding that your intent versus your impact are different things, and that your intent doesn't necessarily always matter if the impact is great enough.
That was very well worded, and that's a good analogy. I think that it's things like that people can understand, and if people can try to learn a little bit and understand where other people are coming from, then I think we can get somewhere in this conversation. And it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's going to agree on everything. Like you said, I think that's it's an uphill battle that we might never get to the top of the mountain. But if people are willing to try to understand a little bit more, I think that goes a long way. And I think that people when I know, at least with myself, if somebody wants to learn something or understand where I'm coming from on something, and they're willing to listen to me, then I am going to respect them so much more just for trying. And whether or not they agree with me or not, I don't really care. But the fact that they were willing to hear me out, I think is really important. And I think that kind of goes a long way. And that's kind of where dialogue needs to start trending if we really want to get anywhere. Yeah.
All right. So I think these are all, like, I'm glad that we're having these discussions on here at the very least. But okay. So last thing to go. We're going to talk about two things. It's going to be about Jimmy Vesey and the idea of player agency. And then my concept is that we should abolish the draft of NHL and NBA, MLB, all those types of players. Get rid of it. We don't. Do
you also want to abolish the IRS?
No, we're not getting into that. And I'll tell you what my
I'm just clarifying.
Just clarifying. No. The IRS is fine by me. Please don't audit me. So obviously there was a huge media watch about Jimmy Vesey. Jimmy Vesey was the star from Harvard who won the Hobie Baker Trophy. He was nominated in his junior year. He got better every year while he was in Harvard. He got drafted by the Nashville Predators. He sat out for 4 years, never played for the Nashville Predators. They offered him a spot on their playoff roster this past year to play on like their second or third line, which is bizarre to do that with a kid that's never played an NHL game. There was a bunch of hot takes, especially by the Buffalo News, talking about Jimmy Vesey's a prima donna. He's a spoiled brat. All this other kind of stuff. There was all these posts on Twitter. He's shameful. He should know better. He's without virtue and all this other kind of stuff. Basically, because he did what Justin Schultz did, which was he went to school for 4 years. By the way, he went to Harvard. He went to school for 4 years. Went to Harvard. He went to Harvard for 4 years. Had a lot of Dunkin' Donuts. No, he went to Harvard for 4 years. He played 4 years of hockey. He got better every year that he played hockey at Harvard. Sat out, got offered a contract right out the bat after his NCAA season ended to play in the NHL. He said no, and then decided where he wanted to go on August 15th. Now, do you think somebody is spoiled because they took that route, like to choose where they wanted to go as as a drafted now UFA after he sat out those 4 years after his draft?
Do I think that that they're spoiled? I think that.
Or what was your take on it in general?
Here, my take is I think it says a lot about where the economy is going in a way. Like, hear me out on this. I'm not trying to, not say whether or not it was the right thing to do. I mean, in terms of it was obviously taboo in hockey culture today. But I mean, if you think about any other job prospects or job market, you're going to go to the highest bidder. I mean, if somebody comes to you and they say, hey, we have been watching you for a long time. We like what you do, and we want you to be a part of our organization. Here's what we're going to do for you if you come. You're going to be probably pretty stoked that somebody paid that much attention to you. But if that's not your dream job, and your dream job comes along and says, look, you can come here, and we're going to give you, just about everything that the other guys were going to give you, and that's where you want to go, you're going to go there. Yeah. Now, my problem with abolishing the draft is that the draft does allow teams that, might not otherwise get people to go there, Winnipeg Jets, cough, cough, to stay competitive in the league because, let's face it, who would want to live in Winnipeg if they don't have to? Winnipeg can offer more money, but when there's a salary cap and things of that nature, it's almost like you need a draft to keep teams competitive. in this system. Now, if you are looking at something maybe like soccer in England and you have relegation and things like that, that's a whole nother story. But obviously professional sports aren't done like that over here, and the markets aren't the same. You're not going to be able to get to generate enough revenue if you are the Elmira Jackals or something like that,
Right.
in some small town, as you are if you are, the LA Kings or whatnot. And so I think it's really tough. But I think that I don't blame him for doing it. So let me just say that I don't blame him for doing it, but given that hockey is the sport that it is, and GMs are very willing to pass information along, and it's not a secret that he did this now. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what type of ripple effect it has, or what the impact is moving forward, and is it going to affect his ability to negotiate and get a contract later on, or will it have some type of negative impact on him? I don't know. It's tough, because I do feel bad for the Preds that they invested resources in him, and obviously they're sending scouts up to go and watch and things like that. But I mean, as a Coyotes fan, let me just say this: it has happened multiple times. It happened with, over the years, and so whether it was Peter Mueller or we had Kyle Turris here, who, when Gretzky was here, he played a year, and then when Maloney came, they said he wasn't ready. And so after he had already played a year, they weren't going to have him play as much that second season. I think it was his second season under contract. And so that's when he sat out or something, didn't report, or I don't know exactly what happened. But anyways, that's when they ended up trading him. So I can see both sides, and I can personally relate as a fan. But yeah, it's controversial, no doubt.
Yeah, I see. The way I look at it is this: if I was all right, so I'm gonna go ahead and say a couple things. I'll try and do it as quickly as possible, because I can be quite verbose about this topic in general. I think that every player who is draft eligible and planning to go in the top 10 and are like definitely good. Like if I was Connor McDavid, I would have taken this route. I would have gone to college, and I probably would have gone to college at like BU or BC, or like somewhere that has got staying power as an organization. I would have gone to North Dakota, Denver, Minnesota, something like that. I would have gone there. I would have been there for all 4 years. You probably still get drafted by the Edmonton Oilers, and I win 2 or 3 national championships. I develop as a player. I'm playing against other people that are the same age as me or not older. If you're going in as a freshman, an 18-year-old freshman, and you didn't play juniors beforehand, like you're an exceptional talent or whatever, you're playing against 21-year-olds who are freshmen, because they played juniors in the BCHL or the USHL, and they didn't get picked up right away. So they're stronger, older people. Like, you're more likely to play against older people in the NCAA than you are in the OHL. You're probably going to get more exposure in the OHL, but whatever. So if I'm Connor McDavid, I join Minnesota or I join BU. I'm playing with the second-ranked person in Jack Eichel. I play with him for a year. I play there for 3 more years, and then I get to go wherever I want. Like, you telling me I could choose if I get to go play with Sidney Crosby? Are you kidding me? Or like Claude Giroux, or I get to play closer to home, or like any of those things. If I'm Austin Matthews, I would have gone to ASU for 4 years, sat and just waited and waited and developed as a player and got an education. Because and obviously we're coming from different places, because like the value that I put onto education is probably different than what other people might put onto it. But like, I'm getting my degree in what sports broadcasting or something like that. And if I blow out my knee in the first year, or I break my femur and it's never the same in my second year or something like that, I got something to rely back on. And I get to pick where I'm going to go in 4 years. Like, I'm Jimmy Vesey in it all day, every day, forever.
Yeah,
like, that's how I feel.
Even if you're Connor McDavid, because I mean, if you're Connor McDavid, you go in, you do your year before the draft, which he might not have been able to play NCAA that year, because it might have been the equivalent of like his senior year of high school or something like that. you basically you're giving up three years of burning out your entry level contract. That's the other thing too. So, Vesey is coming in, he's gonna have his 3 years still before he is even an RFA. McDavid's gonna be an RFA at what, 21? He'll be done with his entry level contract, and then he can get paid. I mean, essentially whatever he wants. Because the Oilers will end up matching his contract or whatever, right? So let's say somebody gives him an offer sheet for $7 million for 2 years, $7 million a year. Like, the Oilers, if they want to keep him, have to match it. And someone will come knocking with that offer. So I think, but say you're like a Dylan Strome and you're not going to go in the NHL your first year or two. I think he will end up making the Coyotes this year. But say you're a second rounder or somebody like Vesey, I think you're going to see this a little bit more.
He's a third rounder or something like that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think if you're one of those top couple of guys, if you're a Matthews, you're a McDavid, you're going to go the route that they went, because at 21, they're going to now be able to make the full salary after they burn those 3 years of their entry level deal. I mean, obviously education's important, but for a lot of these guys, that's, they're not really thinking about that at this point, and they're all, fingers crossed they don't get hurt, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but do I think that is really, to me, those guys are the exception to the rule. This is definitely gonna. I think you are gonna see this more. I wonder.
It happened with Kevin Hayes, right? Or was it Jimmy Hayes? I think it was Kevin Hayes. Sure. It happened with. I'm pretty sure it happened with one of the Hayes brothers. It happened with Justin Schultz, who played at Wisconsin, and then he got drafted by the Ducks, and then he, for some bizarre reason, decided to go to the Edmonton Oilers, and then recently he just ended up with the Pittsburgh Penguins and won a Stanley Cup. Like, his route wasn't exactly what he wanted, but he got to choose where he wanted to play for his first couple of years. Now he's got a Stanley Cup. That's like pretty good when you think about it. But I think that I would be more willing to do this if I was a goaltender than if I was anything else. Because goalies
years to develop, and they usually take a little longer.
Goalies take forever to develop, and sometimes by the time you're done developing, you end up third on the depth chart.
So it'll be interesting to see if goalies kind of take that route.
That would be interesting. I think about like a guy I'm trying to think of his name, like what is his name? Stolars, Anthony Stolars, right? He's taking some time to develop, and he got drafted by the Philadelphia Flyers. He was playing for Nebraska Omaha. He left. He went to the London Knights. Now he was playing in the AHL. And then all of a sudden, the Flyers drafted like 4 or 5 goalies in a span of like 2 years. And so now Alex Lyons, who was like one of the best goaltenders in the NCAA, is a free agent pickup for them. Who else? What was it? Is it Felix Sandstrom? I think is another one. This guy that they just drafted out of the Everett Silvertips is another guy. Like, they have a ton of goaltending prospects now, and Anthony Stolars has to be ready. Carter Hart, yeah. They have Merrick Madsen, who played for Harvard. Like, they have a bunch of goalies, because goalies don't always pan out very well. They have all these goalies ready and nipping at the heel and all that kind of stuff, ready to come in and play some hockey. And like, if Stolars doesn't develop in the next year and a half, he's going to be out of a job, and he doesn't even have a chance to crack an NHL lineup. But maybe if he just played his years and like didn't have to worry about this and developed on his own time and played some juniors and all that kind of stuff, like maybe he signs with a team that's better suited, that's going to give him playing time quicker. Like maybe like an organization that doesn't have a lot of organizational depth on the back end. So
I don't want to burst your bubble, but I can tell you in my East Side Hockey Manager GM mode, Stolars just really did not pan out too much. So
no. Hopefully, I hope he does as a Flyers fan. I hope he does.
There's so many teams that have that depth. Like you think about Winnipeg with Eric Comrie and Connor Hellebuck, and I mean, I think Winnipeg is going to have some talent in net looking long term. Plus,
Hutchinson's good,
very good. Pittsburgh with Murray and Jerry, and they got Ajari, and they got to figure out what they're going to do with those guys. I think Murray
Pittsburgh is a team I think about like that. Like they had Jeff Zatkoff, they had Murray, they had Vokunda for a little while, they had Fleury. Like people that they were signing, they're saying like you're going to be the future of this team. But Marc-Andre Fleury's still around, and then Murray progressed so well, and then Zatkoff was there for a while, and then like Yari's there. It's like that's a lot of people. You got like John Curry was signed out of BU to be like the goalie of the future for the Penguins, and John Curry, like where's John Curry right now? Like. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I guess we'll probably see at least one more next year. Does it hurt those guys? Like what kind of effect will it have? Will the NHL have to make a rule to combat it, or what do you think?
I hope not. I hope they don't take away the agency of players like that, because the players deserve, like, what other occupation ever have you heard of where like you get signed into a 3-year deal just because somebody said, yo, I like you so much, I want you? Like, that's like, that's, I hope they don't revoke the agency. And I don't think that the Players Association would ever allow the CBA to do something like that. Like we'll see another season long lockout before we allow. And like, I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff in terms of lockouts. Like basically lockouts are just basically the owners saying, listen, we made a lot of mistakes about how we spend, save us. So you guys can't play until we reverse everything that we did negatively. Like that's basketball lockouts, baseball lockouts. That's basically what they all are. So this brings us, I think, to one of our final points. I think we'll go probably until about like 6:45 at the latest here. But I think, do you think the draft is necessary? Like if you have salary caps in place, roster limits in place, and just like that, do you think that like you should just like you should be eligible once you're 18 and people can just sign the crap out of you? Like there's no ELCs or nothing like that. It's just if you like that prospect so bad, you can spend the money on it.
Yeah. I mean, I want to say it's not, but I feel like it is once again, because I don't think that you can say that there aren't ELCs, but now all of a sudden, if you're Winnipeg and you want to get that one guy, you want to have, you have to have some type of prospect pool. I mean, so what? You have to offer, an extra $3-4 million a year to get that guy to go play for you versus, say, the Hawks or somebody like that. And then that's how much of their salary cap that they're devoting to having a young player that might not even stick around after he is there for a couple of years, because there is no ELC keeping him there at a low rate, or there's nothing that's enticing him to stay, I guess. So I feel like the only issue is that it could have a very negative impact on small market teams, or teams that are in places that are cold as crap. For people, just anywhere where somebody might not want to go. And I don't know. I don't want it to just be fair and balanced and equal and all of that. But at the same time, that is part of why hockey has become so watchable. That's why the NHL, I think, is the best professional sports league in North America, really, is because of how competitive it is. And you can be a Florida Panthers fan and still make the playoffs. I mean, if like, I don't know, it just, to me, there's something about that. You look at the NBA and you got the best 4 teams, it seems like every year, don't really change very much.
But they're making more money than the NHL year in and year out when they got super teams. Like you look at the NBA, like the biggest story about when super teams all come together is that like who's going to be the team to beat the super team. Like the Milwaukee Bucks beat the Golden State Warriors for their first loss of the year, and then like how triumphant. Like we almost forgot that LeBron had the big 3 that he brought to Cleveland, because we were like, the Golden State Warriors are like, 71-11, or like, or excuse me, like 73-9 or whatever. Like we forgot all about that. and we're just like, yo, LeBron's up against the wall. And like the Oklahoma City Thunder almost beat that Golden State team. They choked and didn't do it because Klay Thompson went off in game 6. It's 5 in game 5. And like that to me is like that's drawing people still in with all these ideas, super teams and stuff like that. And I like hockey because it is so balanced, but I also don't like the fact that the top 5 earners in the league, like Toronto and Philadelphia and Detroit, are constantly keeping teams afloat with their revenue through revenue sharing. It's like, yo, get rid of those teams. Do we really need those 2 teams in Florida? Do we? Like, do we? You know, that's how. I mean, it's good for the sport, but yeah, it's good for grassroots,
right? And that's what it comes back to is, what are the goals of the NHL and of the brand, and like what are we trying to do with hockey moving forward? I mean, from a revenue sharing standpoint, yeah, you could definitely look at it like that, but without having teams in markets like Phoenix and Miami and Tampa, the NHL isn't getting the TV contracts that they get. They have markets. Some of the biggest TV markets in the country are markets that are non-traditional hockey markets. Dallas is a huge TV market. Phoenix is one of the 10th or 11th biggest cities in the United States. So these are markets that the NHL needs in order to get these huge TV revenue sharing deals that the money is then, obviously split amongst the owners and like you alluded to. Yeah, it's definitely not a free market solution. And is it fair to some of these owners? No, probably not. But you could definitely argue that the NHL would not be as powerful as it is these days without teams in some of those markets.
Yeah, and I think it spreads the sport in that area.
Oh, 100%. I mean, would people be playing? Would there be as many hockey rinks as there are in Florida if it wasn't for the Panthers and the Lightning? Absolutely not. Would Jacob Chitrin be trying to make the Phoenix Coyotes this year if it wasn't for those 2 teams in Florida? Probably not. There are a lot of kids coming out of Florida. Look at Shane Gostisbehere in Philadelphia. Exactly, right? And you look at Austin Matthews. I mean, these are guys that, and Austin Matthews is the perfect example of why hockey matters in these markets because as he said, he was a kid that went to some Coyotes games with his uncle, and that's how he got into hockey. And to me, obviously, I want to grow the sport, and I want as many people as possible to be able to play. But I think the NHL wants the same, and they should have a vested interest in growing the game in as many different ways as possible because that is how they grow their brand. And in today's and where media and the economy are moving in the direction that they're going, where social media and revenue is created by, things like getting people to click on articles and getting more people to watch and tune in and having your brand be more exposed to more people. It seems like to me it's a no-brainer to have as big a market share as possible or to have as many people exposed to your brand as possible because that is another way to make money.
Yes.
So I think personally, I think they should be in those markets, and I think it would be tough to do without the draft. But hypothetically, I'd love to see it go away. It's just whether or not it makes sense in context, I think is kind of it's TBD.
TBD. That's a great way to look at it. All right, Kev, I think this is a great place to leave off. I just want to thank Kevin Smith, who you can find on Twitter at Kevin Smith AZ.
I don't know if you want to follow me.
He is worth the follow. He's a great zebra as well, great roller zebra out there. He's a great friend of mine as well. You can also look at his website, which is wheelrdac.com. It is Roller Dad Apparel Company. It's wear roller hockey, grow roller hockey, that kind of thing. That's wheelrdac.com. Please take a look at that. You can find Kevin sporadically when the podcast comes out on NCRHA Coast to Coast. You can follow NCRHA Coast to Coast at NCRHA_C2C. Kevin also runs that Twitter. I help out from time to time. You can find me, Ian Prescott, at Meet the Prescott. That's MEETTHEPRESCOTT. We appreciate you, the followers and listeners and watchers that came out for tonight for our first ever podcast. I think we're going to try and make this a weekly thing, or at least a bi-weekly thing. And I think it's a great time to be alive right now, considering that hockey is back on TV. 8:00 tonight. Team North America, who is the team I am rooting for, because Sarah is half Canadian and I am obviously American, so we needed a way not to yell at each other during this World Cup, is on ESPN2 tonight. Kevin, any last thoughts on the way out?
Hockey is back on ESPN. Let's rewind to the last time that was happening. I think we were watching Barry Melrose and John Butchergross on NHL Tonight back in the day. So
yeah, man,
it's pretty crazy to see.
Gary Thorne, Bill Clement, all the greats. Darren Pang, yeah.
Darren Pang, the legends.
The legends. Holy jump and what a save. Yeah, great things here. Yeah, I think final thoughts is we enjoyed that you guys all came out to listen to this, and we look forward to doing this for you again. We will make this available hopefully either on iTunes, or I will start a SoundCloud that you guys can look at. Tentatively, the name of the show is Meet the Prescott, so look up that. And as Kevin normally says on our other podcast, let the debate begin.